So today we're going to be breaking down Vadeal and Rezon's win in the $200 Victory Cash Cup that Boo posted. So it was $200 per win, and they managed to win this game out of Turtle Split, which is incredibly impressive when you consider the amount of kills this team put up. So I want to break down just how they did it. So the first thing to note is that when it comes to duos compared to trios, it is a lot easier to get enough loot to actually go out and key. So in this game in particular, they get enough loot to comfortably key Kappa within a minute of landing. That is something that is like incomprehensible when it comes to trios. When it comes to duos and even solos, more so in solos, you can get enough loot to key super fast. So already we now have double sentinel, we have fizz, we have a launch pad, we have everything we need to key. And because surge in duos is substantially lower than it is in trios, taking a soft fight in duos is incredibly beneficial. On top of that, when they go for an early game fight onto Kappa, they decrease the risk they can get third party. So one of the downsides to fighting, especially in duos, is there's just more teams around the map. You would never see a kid randomly over here in duos, and you would never see this many players over here mid-map in trios. But because we're in duos now, you're going to see a lot more teams randomly around the map. So you need to end your fights quickly. When it comes to visuals, the range is 275 meters. So anyone within that range is going to hear you fighting. So going for an early fight onto Kappa, when not that many people are going to be in this visual range to be able to hear the fighting and then come over and third party it, is incredibly important. So because they go for this fight early, they decrease the chance of the game third partied, they increase the chance this team is not ready for it, and on top of that, they can always circle back to this island they didn't loot and recover loot if they saw fight it and are forced to stall. So every single bit of logic says take the fight here, you can always recover if worse comes to worse. Now, I said that when you key early, one of the benefits is that the team isn't ready for it. And in this case, Dexy is not ready for it. So he's over here farming, he hasn't popped any shield because he's waiting, he wants to find some minis, you know how it is. And because of that, when Rezon and Vadeal all of a sudden start gliding down, Dexy is forced to panic, try and pop his splashes. He has an auto shotgun. And all of a sudden, because he had to take that time to pop his heals, he doesn't have really strong established space. He's instantly pushed out. And then Rezon just going to hit him with some devastating piece. So there was really no chance in that fight for Dexy to do any real counter damage, and the one chance he does get, he just gets insta piece, and then Rezon just comes over and just belt. But again, because they went for a fight so early, there is no one around that's going to be within visual range and is going to react quick enough to come over and third this. And on top of that, because they ended the fight so fast, if a team was within visual range and wanted to come over in third party, the fight would already be over by the time they arrived. So when it comes to duos, something you need to be really cautious of, solos as well, is knowing how many people can hear your audio. Because when it comes to these modes compared to trios, because there's just so many more teams, you are going to run into a lot more third parties that you might not be used to because of trios. Now, we are about to see Vadeal put in a lot of pain here without actually doing damage, so I want to kind of focus on it. So, Shark and Comeback get a pretty good beam on Rezon, knocking him down to 13 HP. So what Vadeal needs to do here is he needs to take the fight to Shark and Comeback. He needs to buy time for Rezon, who is now on 13 HP, to be able to heal. So he does this without even doing damage. Now, how does he do it? So first, Comeback lands on the backside, he runs over, gets the wall, edits the cone, whiffs the shot. But because he gets this piece, all of a sudden Comeback has to like panic, he has to slow down, he can't keep aggroing, right? Vadeal's taken their aggression and put it onto him. Then he turns around, runs over, is able to essentially full piece Shark, and Shark's able to get out of it. But because he's able to buy all of that time, Rezon has gone from 13 HP up to 113 HP. He was able to pop 2 minis and a big. He is now healthy. He is now able to contribute to this fight. It is now no longer a free win for Rezon's team. And so even though Vadeal whiffed both shots, he was still able to put in so much just pain and just fighting counter aggression that he was able to turn the course of this fight. Now, he's actually going to be able to hit a shot here. Shark comes over, tries to go for a smack blindly, gets pumped for 150. You'll always see this. Vadeal always, whenever he's fighting, pushes as far left as he can. It's going to come into play later and get him a kill, but keep track of this. Every time Vadeal fights, he's always trying to slide and get as far left as he can to take away his opponent's right-hand peeker's advantage. So now that we've gone like a good amount of counter aggression, we force his team to slow down. We try and go for any counter aggression we can. When we can't get it, Rezon calls for them to go into the building so they can refarm and get these barrels. Now, here is the key thing I brought up before. I mentioned before how Vadeal is always sliding, and this not only saves his life, but gets them a kill. So right here, we have Shark lurking on their wall, right? They have no idea. He's going for the smack. I'm going to slow this down. He breaks this wall and Shark gets it. He instantly tack sprints to the left and crouches. So I'm going to play this. Instantly goes all the way to the left. And so now, because he's in this position all the way to the left, Shark over here can't see him. He can't see Vadeal. He has no angle to shoot Vadeal. So either he was going to be forced to do this edit, which he did, which is a bottom 3 tile edit, in which case he can't see Vadeal, or he was going to be forced to take a top 3 tile edit, in which case Vadeal has this same angle as him and is able to get off a massive bit of counter damage. So just try and get in this habit of just swinging to the left as much as you can, because if he didn't do this, Vadeal would be dead. He's able to pump, replace the wall, and then Comeback here is trying to run over to support his teammate. Vadeal gets the wall back, pumps him 100, and now Comeback is stuck in this spot where he can't get out, tries to tack sprint out, and is dead. And so just like that, because Vadeal's movement is so good, which can only be built from just so much time practicing and just playing, just those instincts take so much time, he's able to get them a kill. And if Vadeal didn't tack sprint to the left there, if he didn't have that instant instinct, Vadeal is almost guaranteed dead there, and this game is not going to end in a win. So, just real quick, there's something you guys should be focused on. So, again though, because they do not have any whites, it's almost impossible for them to camp this card when zone ends up popping in 30 seconds. So they are going to be forced to leave it. So zone pops, they decide to start wrapping down. The idea behind this rotate is they're going to wrap down and then just play towards this dead side down here. Makes a lot of sense. It's a tried and true way of playing Fortnite since the days of like your fellow Arab. But as they're rotating, they notice Cairo over here. And because we are in the meta where anyone can get keyed at any moment, they fizz, they crash pad. Also, whenever you're crash padding, let me just go back and play this real quick. Whenever you're crash padding, you want to have as little time between players hitting the crash pad as possible. You want one player to hit the crash pad and then the next player to instantly hit it afterwards. Because the longer time you have between players hitting crash pads is the more amount of time a player has to react. So because they're basically on top of each other, they're basically both able to contribute here. And instantly, Rezon's able to get the kill. And so already, even though we're landing turtle split on the bottom right of the map, a pretty meh split overall, we are able to walk out of third zone with already 4 kills. About as good loot as you can ask for without having mythics and exotics, and they are now primed to potentially win this game. So from here, it's going to be mainly, and this is a true Fortnite fundamental, is after third zone, you should mainly be focused on getting as stacked as possible for endgame. From here until like about 7th zone, you should mainly just be focused on getting stacked and getting primed for endgame. Because all the aggression you do from this point on, it's going to be harder and harder and harder in order to recover if you don't get that kill. So we rotate over, we see a team. We decide to pause here. When next zone pops, they decide to hug the river to deny LOS on that team to minimize the amount of teams that can see them, and then they can cut in beneath, and then they can, once they get to here, they can choose to go wherever they want. So I talk about it all the time, which is you want to control your own destiny when it comes to Fortnite. So once they get to this position right here, they can choose to rotate this however they want. They can cut up and get towards demons and play that refarm. They can play back here, like ultimate dead side. They can go down here. Wherever they want to play, wherever Rezon wants to play in his mind, he can choose to go to. And that's important because if you aren't able to play Fortnite the way you want to play Fortnite, the game becomes infinitely harder because you aren't able to actually control anything. But if you're able to put yourself in positions where your mid-game rotates, you're able to control, you're able to dictate where you go, you're going to find yourself consistently ending up in better positions in the later game because you're in positions you know how to play. So we end up finding ourselves in a pretty good refarm position. Note how Vadeal is constantly expanding out to get more refarm. This is something I see a lot of players struggle with, which is you should always be focusing on getting as much refarm as possible. So even though they invested in this base, they still have as close to 555 as you can possibly get. So now we have a little emote break to really enjoy our time. So this team starts keying over because they need surge, because they need loot, because they need a little bit of everything, right? But because they have so many mats, because they already have space, they don't really need to panic here. Again, notice how Vadeal gets into this bottom left corner. So if this guy up here, Phantom, were to edit, his edit would be just a straight 50-50 edit. His edit would be an edit where Vadeal also is able to punish him on it. If you want to get better at angles when it comes to Fortnite, Vadeal is one of the best players in the world to study. His angles are incredible. Let's swap over to Rezon real quick. Again, gets into that tight left corner so he can look for counter damage on that lower angle. Whenever you're on that bottom angle, you want to be playing that tight left corner because there really isn't a peek they can do where you can't punish them. So they make a little bit more space backwards. So the one downside to this fight is they did lose a pretty good amount of mats from a fight that they didn't really net anything out of. But when it comes to Fortnite, you need to be able to recover from fights like this. You are never going to be 100% away from teams doing dumb stuff like this. Now, this is one of the more creative crash pads I've seen. So what most teams would do here is they would just make a low crash pad or just high crash pad. But the problem is here, you have one team that can look at them, two teams that can look at them, and they know they have a team close to their right because they just fought them. So that's three different teams that if they high crash pad can kill them. So most teams in this position would low crash pad, but that's not what they do. And I really like the crash pad play they do here. So they fizz, and instead of editing top, they reset it, place a floor, and they bump their head so that they stay as low as possible. So that way if they get shot at, they can build and defend themselves, but they still end up in the same position they were trying to get to before. Now, is this crash pad as fast? No. Is this crash pad always as good as its traditional crash pad? No. But in this specific situation where you know you have teams looking at you, doing that low crash pad and using the movement you have, the B-hops you have, in order to get to that same position while making sure you aren't so high that you are just going to die off the air is incredibly, incredibly beneficial. I think it almost certainly has a place in most people's repertoire and like arsenal of crash pads. One of the first times I've seen that crash pad really used in mid-game, and I really like the usage of it. So next on pulls Max, which is a pretty rough rotate for them. In duos, you're going to find yourself running out of mobility and crash pads a lot earlier than in trios. Just because in trios, you usually have two people holding crash pads or one person holding crash pads on a launch pad. So this is where the game kinda gets out of their control and almost goes really, really poorly. So because we're on this like low ground position, we try and go for a beam on that team backside. And then we try and throw down a crash pad. But as we do this, The team that's also on our low ground layer, this team that's like shambles, this same team from before, starts running over and starts aggressing because they want to take this crash pad too. They want to fight for it. They want to do all this dumb stuff. And so all of a sudden, they're not able to do this coordinated crash pad when they want to. They're just struggling. They're just trying to get any crash pad off at this point. They head it out. They end up using 2 crash pads on this rotate. And because Rezon's now flying through the sky here, gets hit down to 1 HP, barely survives. And because this team doesn't have whites, their entire game is now changed by this. They now have to play around the fact that Rezon only has 34 white HP. This is their #1 concern. This defines every play they're going to make for the rest of the game until they get that siphon. So we tarp in a bit here. He has to at this point, right? Because at this point, we are so low that if we do not tarp in here, if we run any risk that we get sprayed, very easily could turn into Rezon dying. So we're forced to burn just so many mats there because we picked that low ground position. We picked that low ground position. That team from before ended up fighting us, and all hell broke loose. So I think the main takeaway from that rotate is you want to just be more elevated so that it's harder for those shambles teams to key you. But again, it is very situational. It's more of a micro thing than a macro thing you can really take too much away from. Now, what they're going to do here is they are going to hyper focus on trying to find a siphon on this rotate. Now, they play this incredibly aggressively. Something to note is that, again, this is a format where you only get money per win. So all of you guys at home, all of you girls at home too, if you are in this position, you do not need to force the siphon as hard as Rezon does here. He goes incredibly aggressive to try and get a siphon here, so he has the HP to actually play out this game. I think for most of you, in most situations, you do not need to force it as hard as he does here. Now, the idea behind this play is that they're going to sit back and they're just going to try and beam crash patterns. That all these teams that are on this north side of them over here are going to crash pad and they're going to fall in front of them. And that Rezon can get one good lucky beam, he can get the siphon he needs to be able to play out the rest of this game. But as you can probably see, it's not really going the way they planned. They're not really getting the beams they expected, and so they're going to do something that is pretty risky. So they get a crack on this player over here, Prism. They know he's low. So Rezon basically calls to full 50-50 this guy. Ends up in his box. He's able to hit 100, and he's able to kill. This is a psychotic play. And I think most of the time, going for a play this crazy is a bit too much. Going for this much risk, this deep in a game, in like an opens format, is pretty wild. Because if you die there, this is a 22nd place with 4 kills. It's a pretty bad game. But because this is a format where only the win matters, going for power plays like that when you know you have an advantage, that being the player is low, is definitely worth it. So being able to play differently depending on what the format is an incredibly important skill when it comes to Fortnite. We land. We notice this player over here appears to be a solo, so we tarp out of wood to try and get this refresh, where he's able to chase him off the Slayer. Now, because we went for an aggressive play in wood, we do get counter-aggressed, but they're able to get out of it. So they do go for a high crash pad there. I do not believe they were intending to do a high crash pad there, but because he was in a 1-tile box, he threw it too far forward, and it was a high crash pad. So if he wanted to do a lower crash pad there, he would have had to throw it a little bit further back. Notice how he pre-fizzes to be prepared for the next rotate. The game is always won in the transitions. So now, this is something that the first team I really saw do this was Teeny whenever last time Fizz was in the game. So I've always called this the Teeny tarp, which is to play on an elevated mid-ground layer, and then just use Fizz, and then just B-hop all the way forward, and then when you get forward, swap from wood to your hearts. Also, this is just absolutely clean piece. Not much to say there. That is just super, super strong aggression. Just noticing the players get split, instantly calling to aggress the wall, and just punishing this team off of it. That is about as well as you can lead a fight. Like, this is just clean. Super strong teeny tarp, utilizing that wood to get forward. Switches to hards. Identifies this duo, instantly tarps to it. Edits. 150. Slows down, doesn't instantly go into the box. Instead, goes for this piece, getting this cone and this wall to ensure that we're safe. And then going for the aggression inside. Is so clean. Everything about that was so fundamentally sound. And because he got that piece, we have a safe tarp to back up into. We have 1,500 mats total. We're going to go for a teeny tarp again. We kind of mess it up, but we're still able to get forward. So things get a little messy here, but they're able to recover. Again, you need to be able to tarp off Fizzy in this meta, especially in duos. You need to be able to do... You need to be comfortable doing that, like, little B-hop tarp. If you aren't, you need to get comfortable enough, like, doing it. Whatever you have to do, whether it's going creative and just tarping with Fizz, you need to be able to do this. So even though it doesn't take them far, it utilizes that one crash pad. They really did get a lot of value out of low crash pads, like crash padding downwards. A lot more than most teams I've seen. See a body, try to go for it. Again, though, they're really moving in sync. Like, even though Rezon is the IGL more so than Vadeal, the fact that, like, everything they aggress, everything they go for is something they are doing together makes them so, so deadly. Now, the second final zone pops, that's when it clicks in their head. That's when all of a sudden it goes from we are playing Fortnite to we are winning this game of Fortnite. So the second zone pops and transitions into the final zone. They Fizz. He edits. Looks up briefly. Doesn't see height. And just calls to go for it. And Fizz crash pads up. Because he does this ramp crash pad, Vadeal's able to easily follow it up and go straight up. This crash pad will take you 10 layers up. Goes up. And is able to 150 the player. And from here on out, it's essentially a guaranteed win as long as they play it properly. They have height, they have good mats, they are in a position where it is top 7 with only 10 players left. It is almost an entire lobby of solos. And so from here, they are going to be very easily able to pressure second height and ensure they win the game as it pulls up a mountain. This game was really won by early game aggression that set them up with good loot, and then just strong recovery. They played super, super well when it comes to just aggressing as a duo. Now, it definitely helps that Rezon and Vadeal have played together in numerous different things over the years. They have about as much chemistry as a duo can possibly have, but they still just have such a strong vision of the game together that led to this win. So I hope this helped you guys. As there are more games that come out in duos and solos, I'll make sure to keep vodding them. This is the first real duos game I'll be able to VOD review. I hope this helps you guys a bit. I know it's not the most jam-packed video of all time, but I think it sets out like a clear blueprint for how to play duos, and I hope you guys really enjoyed.